President Barack Obama came out with his 2014 budget proposal on Wednesday morning. And of course, it had about $800 billion in new taxes over the next 10 years. Here to talk about it with us today is Marc Gerson. He is a former tax counsel for the House Ways and Means Committee, and he is working now at Miller and Chevalier. And Marc, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
So Marc, the first question is, the new proposals by the president for tax reform, are they really that new?
Well, the newest thing is that there are really significant, about $580 billion of new taxes on individuals. And there are two proposals. One is the so-called Buffett rule, which is essentially a 30% minimum tax on high-income taxpayers. And then there's a 28% limitation on certain deductions and exclusions, which would limit the tax benefit of items such as the home mortgage interest deduction.
So what would the general takeaway be by people who have been against the president's tax proposals for that?
Well, I think it's very interesting because the administration, to some degree, is portraying the budget proposal as some type of potential compromise document. But these $580 billion of new taxes on individuals are going to face a really hard time in the Congress, particularly from Republicans who believe that the January fiscal cliff deal dealing with the Bush tax cuts really settled the revenue issue, particularly with respect to the individual tax rate structure.
Sure, yeah, that's certainly been a contention of Republicans. But let's look at the budget proposal by the president. A lot of people like to talk about meaningful tax reform. Do you think this brings up some meaningful tax reform?
Well, it's very interesting because I think over the last couple of years, it's been widely viewed that the Congress has been more proactive and more engaged on tax reform and certainly spending a lot of time. The interesting thing about this budget, particularly from the business tax perspective, is although many of the proposals, actually most of the proposals, are recycled from previous budgets, a lot of the proposals have been identified explicitly in the budget as items that should be used for what's called revenue-neutral business tax reform. So it seems that the administration is at least thinking more about which proposals it has in its budget should in fact be used for a future tax reform effort.
So most experts probably aren't expecting the president's budget proposal or even Paul Ryan's budget proposal to pass as is. But do you think that this is at least a step in the right direction towards the right kind of tax reform that Congress people have been talking about for the past 2 years during the past election cycle?
Well, I think any type of document or proposal out there can certainly help advance the debate. Obviously, there are big threshold issues like the revenue issue we talked about that need to be resolved. And a lot of the proposals in the administration's budget have been around for a number of years and haven't really gained traction in Congress, either as part of tax reform or outside of tax reform. That being said, the fact that the administration has at least had this categorization of proposals, I think, is interesting. And at the same time, we're seeing increased congressional activity with respect to tax reform that I expect will continue and increase in the coming months.
Marc, this is certainly an area you're probably familiar with. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
I'm Joe Deaux, The Street.